Hey guys, my name is Urosh. Hope you liked what I did. I actually am recording this for the third time, but I think third time is the charm. Before we begin the project, looking at the project, I just want to say that I will post the links to Catching Flies, like his social media, the original track, in the description down below. So check it out because obviously he's an amazing musician, really talented, and yeah, so he gets some more recognition as well, right? Okay, let's just dive into the project. Okay, I got my headphones on and let's just start. Before we delve into separate instruments and how I try to do the remake, let's just talk a little bit about the scale and the composition of the track because it's important and I'm gonna reference it later on as we progress in the video, right? But the key of the track or scale is E minor, right? So we start on E minor, we only have one sharp, which in our case, F turns into F sharp, right? So we have F sharp, but as you can see, we have E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, right? So basically only white notes starting on E except for F sharp, right? That's important because I'm gonna reference it later on, like I said. The other thing we also have to talk about is the chords of the track. We only have 3 chords in this track, yay! But we have E minor, then C major, and then A minor, right? These are just the basic triads which I've wrote here, right? But I also spread them out a bit more, so we have like a bit more like open or bigger voicing. So let's listen to this. Right, so like I've said, just 3 chords starting on E minor, then C major, and then A minor. What I also added here in the end is the kind of like ostinato, or basically kind of like a pulse that is basically playing throughout the track. So we'll first listen to it on the piano, and then I'll show you how I made it in like basically synth sounds, right? Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this basically kind of pulse, kind of ostinato repeating pattern that is playing basically throughout the whole track, right? There is some, I would say, some modulation or dynamic changes, especially in the volume. As you can see, I use the utility to go kind of dip it a bit here, which kind of makes sense, right? When other instruments come, you want to a bit move it a bit away so it gets more space, right? But in essence, it's pretty simple. If we look here in the piano, basically the top note is staying the same, which is an E, which is basically the root note of the whole scale, right? But here we're moving down, basically. It kind of looks almost like stairs, right? If you think about it. And that is basically repeating throughout the whole track, right? What I've used here, I've used piano. I've used actually 2 pianos. I've used the Giant, or no, maybe it's just Giant. Okay, pardon me. It's just the Giant. What I did is I layered it with different synths. So we have this synth, which just gives us B with a reverb, right? It kind of emphasizes the starting note, if you would think about it like that. And this synth is from Diva. It's called PML PL Sign Plug. I've used this one. I've also added another synth, but I took away a couple of notes here, right? So it doesn't actually layer all the notes. Let me put it in solo. This is how it sounds right in solo. We add this. We add the piano. And I've also used another layer, which I used, I think, Diva for. But again, just the same pattern, but just kind of layering it, right? So all of them together. And that's basically it for this ostinato, right? Which, like I've said, repeats throughout the whole track. Okay, let's move forward. So the other thing we can talk about is the pads, right? And I've used, as you can see, I've used one, two, three, four different pads. Two pads are from Omnisphere, and I think this one is Serum, and this one is original pads. But they are pretty simple. They are actually pretty simple. What they play is they just play a power chord of E minor or E power chord basically. So without the thirds, we're not using a G here, right? As you can see, it's just E, B, and another E, right? And it sounds like this. So we have this pad, pretty simple. Another one, which kind of opens if I open it faster. All right. Then this one, just adding some like texture to it. As I've heard this pads, like these pads are not actually like moving, they're not actually like playing chords and stuff, but they're just providing like a texture and kind of like a not a foreground, but background on which other elements will basically shine through, right? That's how I see it. There is probably even more pads in the original. I don't know exactly, obviously, what he used and stuff, but I think maybe in the second part, there's another pad which kind of adds even more higher layers to it. But yeah, these pads basically just kind of play kind of like the droney thing in the background, very ambient here, right? What I've also added to these pads is some noise sounds, right? So we have one noise and basically a sample of like, it's not crickets, but it's like a vinyl thing, like some crackles and stuff like that. It will add a lot of space. We will fill the space with it. And it would also add like some details and stuff, right? It will put like the track into a certain kind of space, right? For example, for your tracks, you could use like, I don't know, birds or whatever, like, but it will add another element to it, like of details and stuff, right? Almost fumbled there, but you can hear the crackles, right? So that's basically it for the pads and noise sound. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, so let's take a look at the runs, right? Which are basically happening in the background, but they're basically like really, really cool. Like, I don't know like how many times I've listened to this track and I was always like, man, this stuff sounds so cool. And obviously I've tried getting the same notes and like the same rhythm and stuff. Obviously it was really hard, especially like at later parts where there's like multiple elements happening at the same time. You don't really hear it. It kind of gets, kind of meshed together, but I still tried. Let's listen to it. First, I want to just show you how it sounds without any effect. That sounds like this. All right, let me solo it. So when I was listening to this track, right, referencing, I was listening. I was like, man, that's a kind of sounds like a harp sound, but it's not like a harp sound. It sounds like more exotic. Maybe it's like a koto, or maybe it's like some Chinese plucky instrument. But like it's some kind of pluck instrument. But it definitely wasn't a harp. So I was trying out different stuff. And at the end, I used like Guzeng library, I think from Sonic Couture. I've used this one because I thought it sounded kind of similar to it, right? And Catching Flies is quite like, I wouldn't say famous, but known for like using organic instruments. Even in his live performances, you can see that he uses like synths and also like organic instruments, right? So you want to, I don't know what he used, if he did the MIDI or a sample or whatever, but you want to make this organic instrument sound organic, right? So one of the things which is really important, especially if you have this libraries, is to use the velocities, right? Because velocities will really help you to add more realism and more organism. No, it's not more organism, but you know what I mean. It's gonna make it sound more organic, more cool, right? So I've used a lot of velocities here. As you can see, almost always I try to put the velocities down, right, after the phrase ends. So kind of like it helps us of like landing softly and stuff, right? If everything was like out of the box, if I would just like, for example, select all these velocities and just put them up, it's gonna get probably loud. So for example, this is obviously way too plucky, right? But even then, like, if you put it lower, it just doesn't sound like real. You know what I mean? It just sounds like computerish, right? And this sounds way better, and we're just using velocities basically, right? Now, the other thing you also want to do when you're just dealing with these kind of fast runs and stuff, you want to use the, basically when somebody would do this in real, they wouldn't be on the grid, right? There's no way, not in any galaxy, it would happen where it would be very like straight on beat. So what you can do is you can either manually like drag them over each other or overlap them or kind of mess it off the grid a bit, or you can always use the humanize button here. So you just select them all and humanize it a bit, and it's gonna sound way better, right? So as you can see, this one is offbeat a bit, this one's cool, this one's offbeat, you know, this one's offbeat. Some of them overlap as well, you know, so that really helps with the whole realism, right, of these kind of instruments, right? Also, one thing pointing out, right, when I was listening to this basically runs and stuff, I was thinking to myself, oh, it sounds very like Chinese, right? Kind of like that, right? And I've also kind of figured out later that it probably uses like a minor pentatonic scale, right? And even if I turn it off, right? This is without the scale function. But if I turn this E minor pentatonic scale, it's going to give me the same notes, right? So once I figured it's probably using like E minor pentatonic scale, it really helped me out when I was trying to figure out the notes, right? Because I knew which notes it's probably using, right? And minor pentatonic scale, because it sounded kind of Chinese, right? Chinese music actually uses a lot of pentatonic, right? Minor and major, right? So it made all sense to me. Like I was like, yeah, man, this is cool. Like I can understand it, right? And how to do a minor pentatonic scale is just you take like I've said in the beginning, E minor scale, right, is the scale of the track, right? Minor pentatonic scale will always sound more like pure because it's gonna avoid the half steps, right, or semitones. Like, so you just want to take F sharp away, and you want to take C away, and you will hear it if I put all the notes closely. Okay, listen. It sounds very, very cool, very Chinese, right? Yeah, it really helped me out because if you look at these notes, right, I've used only these notes, right, and it kind of sounded really similar to what he was using, right? Obviously, I don't know for 100% what he did, but yeah. Also, one thing about these runs is the effects, right? And now we've been hearing it without any effects, right? But let me just show you which effects I've also used, right? So first I added some delay. Let's just listen without the effects, and then I'll show you with the effects as well. So this was without any effects, right? Let me add the delay first. Right, it just adds a bit of like sparkle to it. It adds a bit of like you know, and and then some reverb, obviously, right? Just to add more space to it. And obviously, at the end, well, not obviously, but at the end, I added a bit of crystallizer as well, because when I was referencing the original track, I've heard like there might be something happening, like he might use like some kind of effect, because there was like a kind of like a shimmery, kind of like kind of like another little layer of these harps, right? So I added crystallizer, and I've used basically like a default preset, and I just played around with like the parameters to add a bit of like almost like kind of sounds like a bit of reversiness or something. That's not a word probably, but you will see what I mean. So without it, now we add it. Right, just adds a bit more. So yeah, that's it for the runs. As you can see later, they get even more crazier, right? But yeah, that's it for the runs. But you can also remember, right? If you would be using some kind of runs in your own track and you don't want to, go note by note and la 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 la, always use, you can always add like a minor pentatonic or a major pentatonic, depends on which scale you are. And you can write something and you just use the scale function, and it's going to help you out a lot. You will get these nice runs without even actually knowing all the notes that fit the scale, right? And like I've said, it's gonna sound a bit more pure and kind of like more not that aggressive, because it's gonna avoid those semitones, right? Which kind of define the scale of the key, right? So that's it. Let's move to a different, basically to the lead sound now. Okay, so I have the lead sound open here. Let's just first listen it and then we'll talk about it, right? Okay, so great melody, like really nice melody. It sticks in your head, you don't forget it. And we have this nice motif here, right? Dum, da, bum, bum. Do that. Yeah, we have this nice motif here. Those three notes, right? Those three notes, which basically repeat, right? That's why we call it a motif, because it's gonna repeat and it's gonna help us expand the composition, right? And then, as you can see down below in the left hand, we're basically playing broken down chords, like slower arpeggios, almost like if you if you play the piano. And we're using the chords which I mentioned before, right? So we have E, B, and E, which is like E minor chord, right? E power chord. Then we have C, G, C. And then we have A, E, A, which kind of spells like, oh, it's going to be like A minor, A power chord, right? And these chords basically repeat, except for here, right? You can see the phrase repeating, but kind of stops here. And what is really good about this melody is that it has space, right? It has some rest to it, right? Especially here and here, right? And that really helps it. Like it really makes it a great melody, right? There's a lot of great melodies that have rests, right? And usually a bit of silence makes it's important, right? When making melodies, right? And you will see why also when I show you the Serum thing. So let's just open Serum. This is how the preset looks like. I've used one analog sine wave +1, one 0, and one +1 on this guitar string sample. Let's just solo that first. Just wanted to add a bit of bite to the whole sound, and then all these together. I also have a sub here. So we got LFO controlling some of the fine tuning. We have envelope 2 controlling the filter, and we have this kind of amplifier envelope, right? We're also using a couple of effects. We're using some dimension, a bit of EQ, just taking away the lows, but I also have another EQ later, so it doesn't really matter. I have this bit of distortion on it, some delay and reverb, right? And why I said the rests are really important is because we have a lot of reverb, on this lead sound, right? If I take away the reverb, but that's without the reverb, and now this is with reverb. So yeah, that's why that rest is also really nice, because if you had like, you know, a lot of reverb and then you have a ton load, I don't think that's a word, but you have a ton of like notes, it's gonna sound like not great, not terrible, or maybe it's gonna be terrible, I don't know. But yeah, I guess that's it. I'm also using just some EQ and some compressor, I think, just some compression. I also have another kind of layer here. And also, again, I'm also using, again, the velocities to control the filter a bit, right? So the lowest note don't have, are low in velocity, so they don't open with the filter, while some of the other notes, I wanted them to have more filter open, so they kind of smack a bit more. I think he also used some kind of synth that has the same, you know, velocity mapped to the filter, right? At least that's how I think. Okay, rides are basically very basic, just a single ride, and it kind of, you know, there's some modulation in the volume, but pretty simple, right? Nothing really to talk about. For the bass line, I've used Rickenbacker bass guitar, Scarby Rickenbacker bass guitar, added some glue compressor, some trash to it as well, and some EQ. But let's check the notes as well. They're playing, like I've said before, they're playing the notes of the chords, right? The root note of the chord, which in our case is E minor, C, and then A, right? It's kind of cool that when the bass first hits in this track, it does start on the last note of the chord progression, basically. So it starts on A, right? So it sounds like this. And then goes into... One thing pointing out is also when he uses the bass line, sometimes he goes upstairs, sometimes he goes downstairs on this last note, on A, right? When the A hits, sometimes he goes an octave higher than the other time, right? Which also kind of adds a bit of difference to the track. It just gives it a different feeling, right? As opposed to always having it on the same note, like in the same register or octave. And he also adds a bit of like these passing notes, like little small notes, just to provide like a bit of like extra excitement or something, you know. It sounds really cool. So bassline, right? That kind of stuff, right? Also, I don't know exactly if he used a guitar bass, but listening to his bass line, the bass kind of dies down, if you know what I mean, right? So for example, when the first note hit, you will see the bass is not going to be a sustained, like just a straight line in volume, but it's going to start somewhere and then it's going to slowly, gradually go down in volume, right? So I thought, okay, bass guitar is going to be perfect for that because it's basically kind of like the same thing, right? It's not going to ring to eternity, you know what I mean? All right, that kind of dying down, basically. His bassline has that kind of vibe. So I thought the guitar was perfect for it. I did, like I've said, use a bit of trash. I used this bass guitar attack, right? Just adding a bit of attack to it. I think it's just makes it a bit more, you know, adds a bit. Adds a bit of like weight to it. And I've obviously tried, you know, gaining it, right? So we don't just get volume, but actually like the effect, right? Okay, so that was it for the rides and the bass line. What we have is also the piano, strings, vocals, and the claps. So let's go into that. Okay, so here I have the strings open. Again, like I've said before, it's going to use the notes from the chord progression which we established in the beginning of the video, right? So E minor, C major, A minor, right? I'm repeating myself, but let's just listen to it. Again, like I said, I took away the root note. I don't know which library he used, or even maybe like a real string recording, but it sounded so nice, man. I couldn't get like the similar vibe, but at the end I chosen this one. One thing worth mentioning as well is I've used modulation wheel quite extensively to make it sound organic and real, right? So I was always referencing to the original track, how it kind of sounded. And let's just look how the modulation does its thing, right? Right, so if I would put all this modulation to 100%, like it basically is, when you know, straight out of the box, this is 127, so I'll just put it down. You know, doesn't really sound good, right? So again, this is just another thing of making sure that organic instruments sound organic, especially in a track like this, the way we did with the runs, right? The way we're doing here, the way you want to use the velocities on the synths as well, right? So yeah, those are the strings. The vocals, man, vocals are so cool. I don't know which, you know, where you got them, but they're super cool. They add so much to the track. When the vocals come, there is, I think, a piano in the background, right? It's hard to hear it, but I've tried kind of replicating it. I don't know, obviously, if the notes are correct and stuff, or the voicings, but I did, again, use the same chords. So let's just listen to the piano together with the vocals. And the one thing I also added is the clap, right? Because I didn't know, maybe the clap is already in the vocal recording because it sounds like a tribe singing, like, and clapping at the same time. But I still added a clap, a similar clap to it. I don't know, honestly, which one I've used, but tried to get similar one and just use basically kind of has like a kick rhythm to it, right? Dun, 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 right? Right, just a clap, dude. Such a good track, man. Like, I love it, honestly, dude. But I think we actually went through all the instruments I have here. So yeah, hope you liked the bit. Like I said before, check out Catching Flies. Check him out on social media. Give him a follow or whatever. And if you like this content, give me a like as well. Subscribe, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff. And yeah, hope you're gonna have a nice rest of the weekend, considering it's Saturday, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. Bye, guys. I love you. Talk to you soon. Bye.